Get your black hands off my courtroom floor, now!
Jasmine Owens slowly rose, the mop still in her hand.
Sir, I don't care.
Get out of here!
His lips curled as if he'd smelled something rotten. Margaret stood frozen behind her daughter, pale fingers gripping the cleaning cart.
Sir, please. That's my daughter. She was just helping me.
Caldwell didn't even glance at the older woman. His gaze stayed fixed on Jasmine, cold and disgusted. She looked straight back at him, unblinking, unbowing. That seemed to enrage him even more. He stepped forward, finger pointed at her face.
Crawl back to that stinking pile of garbage you came from, or I'll drag you out of here!
But come Monday morning, he would see Jasmine again. And that time, he would pay dearly for everything he'd done today. The morning had begun quietly, 500 miles away. Jasmine stood in her old federal chambers, taping the last box shut. 26 years of legal practice fit into 9 cardboard cubes stacked by the window. On her desk sat a photograph, edges worn soft from handling. A 7-year-old girl in pigtails holding the hand of a tired woman in a janitor's uniform, both squinting into the sun in front of a familiar limestone building. She slid the photo into her purse last. Outside, the autumn wind pulled at her coat. She drove the 400 miles east, listening to a cassette her mother had burned for her in 2002. Marvin Gaye, Aretha, a scratch of static between every other song. By 3 in the afternoon, the State Supreme Court building rose at the end of Madison Avenue like something carved out of the last century. Limestone columns, a vaulted rotunda, an iron flagstaff turning slowly in the breeze. Inside the portrait gallery, every previous Chief Justice watched from a gilded frame. 17 of them, all men, all white. She did not stop to look. She used the staff entrance on the south side, 2 boxes under her arm, ID clipped to her blazer. The desk officer barely glanced up as she swiped in. Friday afternoons in October were always slow. Most of the building had cleared out for the weekend. She found her mother in the side corridor near Courtroom 3. Margaret Owens, 73 years old, was reaching up to dust the top of a framed Senate proclamation she had been dusting for 32 years. "Mama." Margaret turned and her whole face folded into a smile. "Look who finally showed up." They hugged in the empty hallway. Margaret smelled like the lavender hand soap she had used since the Clinton administration. 2 weeks left, Jasmine whispered into her shoulder.
2 weeks,
Margaret laughed, pulling back. "And not 1 day longer. I told them so." "What you going to do with all that free time?" "Drive you crazy, baby. That's what." Margaret turned back to her cart, then her eyes softened. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Jasmine nodded. 7 years old. You stood right there under that big dome, your little neck craned all the way back, looking at those murals. Margaret pointed with her duster. "And I told you." "One day, baby. One day. One day." They stood for a moment in the quiet. A breeze moved through the high windows. Somewhere down the marble, an elevator hummed. "I wouldn't be here without you, Mama." "Hush," Margaret said, but her eyes were wet. "You did the work. I just held the door." Calvin Daniels rounded the corner then, his security uniform freshly pressed, coffee in hand. "Margaret Owens, don't tell me you're still working. Don't tell me you're still drinking that cheap coffee." Calvin laughed. He glanced at Jasmine politely, the way a man glances at a stranger he assumes is a relative, and tipped his cap. "Ma'am." "Calvin, you remember my daughter?" He squinted. The recognition did not quite land. Jasmine had been a Yale freshman the last time he saw her in this building, 20 years thinner and 20 years younger. "Of course," he lied gently. "How you been?" "I am well, Officer Daniels, thank you." He nodded, stepped back, and continued down the hall whistling a Stevie Wonder song slightly out of key. Jasmine smiled. "He has no idea." "He'll figure it out Monday," Margaret said. They worked together for a few minutes. Jasmine carried boxes into the chambers down the hall. Margaret pushed her cart toward Courtroom 3 to wipe it down for the week. The building was nearly empty now. 4:48 on a Friday in October. The kind of hour where marble floors echoed every footstep. That was when the cart caught on the doorframe. A bottle of industrial floor cleaner tipped from the top tray. The cap, loose, popped off entirely.
Oh no. Lord. No, no, no!
Margaret dropped to her knees, but her old back caught halfway. A pool of pale blue liquid spread fast across the hardwood threshold of Courtroom 3. Jasmine was already moving. She set her box down, crossed the hallway in 3 strides, knelt beside her mother and reached for the paper towels.
It's okay, Mama. I've got it. Baby, your blazer, it is fine. Just hand me the towels.
Margaret pressed a stack into her palm. Jasmine pushed up her sleeves, hair falling loose from its pin, and began blotting the spill in steady circles. Just a daughter helping her mother. A Friday afternoon, ending the way Friday afternoons should end. Then behind them, footsteps. The footsteps belonged to Justice Harrison Caldwell. He returned from a 3-hour lunch with 2 associate justices, a long meal of bourbon, lamb chops, and bitter complaint. For 6 weeks he had stewed over the governor's decision. 6 weeks since the appointment to Chief Justice. His appointment, by every rule of seniority, had been handed to some unknown civil rights lawyer from out of state. He came back to the building only to grab a forgotten briefcase from the bench. He stopped at the open doorway of Courtroom 3. His eyes swept the floor and locked. A black woman, kneeling, in his courtroom. He saw Margaret, too. He always saw Margaret. After 32 years, she had become invisible to him, part of the furniture of the building, no more notable than the brass railings or the radiator vents. His brain registered her and discarded her in the same beat. What it could not discard was the unfamiliar black woman with a mop and rolled-up sleeves on the floorboards in front of his bench. He stepped through the doorway. Margaret, what in God's name is this in my courtroom? Margaret's hand flew to her chest. Your Honor, that's my daughter Jasmine. She was only helping me. Caldwell did not look at Margaret. He raised one hand, palm out, like a man silencing a barking dog. I was asking about the thing on the floor, not you. Jasmine rose, slowly. She set the wet paper towels on the cart beside her mother. The mop she kept in her right hand. Her chin level, her sleeves still pushed past her elbows. Caldwell let his eyes climb her. Shoes first, then trousers, then the loose strands of hair around her temples. He took his time, the way a man inspects livestock he is considering rejecting. You don't even look like a janitor. Who are you pretending to be? Your Honor, I don't. The word cracked across the room. Don't you dare put those 2 words in your mouth in this room. You have not earned the right to call me that. Jasmine did not lower her gaze. She had spent 26 years in courtrooms. She had clerked for a federal appellate judge. She had argued before 3 circuit courts. She had been spoken to in many tones by many men, and she had learned the precise difference between a man losing his temper and a man enjoying it. Caldwell was enjoying it. He pointed at the bronze plaque mounted beside the door. Rules of the Court. Can you read that? Look at me. Can you read that? It's in English. I'm assuming English is something you have. Margaret made a small, broken sound. Jasmine's jaw tightened by a single degree. I can read it, Your Honor. Don't call me that. He stepped closer. The smell of bourbon and breath mints came with him. Show me your hands. Jasmine blinked once. Your hands. Now, palms up. I want to see what you've been touching in my chambers. She lifted her hands. Steady. The mop handle rested gently in the crook of her arm. Her palms were empty. Her fingernails were short and clean. She had once shaken the president's hand with these same hands. Caldwell stared at them for a long second, then sniffed. He reached toward the bench, lifted a thin manila binder, and let it fall to the floor between Jasmine's feet. The pages slapped flat on the hardwood. You missed a spot. There. Bend down. Show me you actually know how to clean something. Margaret made a sound like she had been struck. Jasmine did not move. She did not look at the binder. She looked at him. A long second passed, then another. Caldwell's jaw worked. He had expected her to bend. He did not get what he expected. Margaret, you vouching for her? Sir, she's my daughter. Name! Jasmine spoke before her mother could. Jasmine Owens. The smirk that crossed Caldwell's face was small and ugly. Owens. Of course. A whole family of janitors burrowing through my building. How lovely. Margaret turned her face to the wall. Caldwell walked to the wall phone beside the bench. He lifted the receiver. He pressed the front desk extension. He did not break eye contact with Jasmine. This is Justice Caldwell. There's an unauthorized black female in courtroom 3. No, not Margaret, a different one. I want her ID, her badge, and the name of her supervisor on my desk Monday morning. Yes, that one. He set the receiver down with a soft click that somehow sounded loud. Every word captured. The court's internal phone log recorded every line he had just spoken. He had forgotten this. He had forgotten a great many things today. The hallway door pushed open. Officer Calvin Daniels, badge gleaming, paused in the doorway with one hand still on the latch. He took in the scene in 2 seconds. Margaret, pale, Jasmine standing, Caldwell, red-faced, and his shoulders straightened. Your Honor, everything all right? No, officer, it is not all right. I want this woman removed from my courtroom. Now. Sir, it's just a spill. Are you their officer or mine? Caldwell wheeled on him. Don't make me file a report on your insubordination. Your supervisor's name will also be on my desk Monday. Calvin's jaw flexed. He said nothing. Down the corridor, Theodore Hargrove, senior court attorney, 30 years in the building, slowed as he passed the doorway. He glanced in. His eyes went round. Harrison, he murmured. Easy. Caldwell flicked a hand in the air without turning. Out. Hargrove hesitated. He looked at Jasmine. Something passed across his face. Recognition not of who she was, but of what was happening. He walked on. But that night, at home, he would not sleep. And by Sunday, at 11:52 p.m., he would be drafting an affidavit on his kitchen table. Now Caldwell turned finally to Margaret. It was the first time in the entire encounter that he had looked her in the face. And you? Margaret stood very still. 32 years, Margaret. 32 years in this building, and you still don't understand that your people don't get to drift into a courtroom uninvited. I'll be filing a complaint against you with HR tonight. Improper supervision of cleaning staff. He let that sit. Your retirement is in 2 weeks, isn't it? 2 weeks. Pension paperwork already in motion. His mouth thinned. I imagine pensions can be held up, pending investigation. The room went silent. Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came. Jasmine felt the marrow in her bones go cold. She had been preparing, for 3 full minutes now, to end this. 1 sentence would do it. I am the incoming Chief Justice of this state. 8 words. 8 words, and Caldwell would crumble to the floor. But her mother's pension. 32 years of work. Caldwell still had the authority, today, this weekend, to hold it up, to call in favors, to tangle Margaret in months of investigation she should not have to live through. So Jasmine breathed in and said nothing. Her right hand closed around the mop handle so hard the plastic creaked. Her left hand, hidden against her thigh, drove 4 crescent moons into her own palm with her fingernails. She would find them later, raw and bleeding, and not remember making them. Inside her head, she was not silent. Inside her head, she was counting every word, every adjective, every breath of contempt from the man who would face her on Monday morning and not know, yet, that the bench he had built his life on was already sliding out from under him. Caldwell raised his arm. He pointed at the door. "Out! Both of you! Out of my courtroom before I call the marshals to drag you out the way you ought to be dragged." Margaret reached for her cart with shaking hands. Jasmine bent, calmly. She gathered the soiled paper towels. She set them in the bin on the cart. She straightened her sleeves. She tucked one strand of hair back behind her ear. Then she lifted her chin and walked past Justice Harrison Caldwell into the marble hallway, not looking back. Margaret followed, head down. Calvin stood by the door, not moving, his hand still on the latch. Theodore Hargrove was already gone. In the empty hallway, the elevator chimed. Jasmine reached over and pressed her mother's hand. Margaret was trembling so hard the cartwheels rattled against the marble. "Mama, look at me." Margaret looked up. "You didn't do anything wrong. Do you hear me? Baby, your job, Monday. What if he—" "Monday," Jasmine said quietly, "is going to be a very different day." The elevator doors slid open. They stepped inside together. Friday night came down on the city like a slow gray curtain. Jasmine took her mother to a small Italian place on 9th Street. Checkered tablecloths, candles in old wine bottles, a busboy who knew Margaret by name and brought extra bread without being asked. Margaret tried. She tried very hard. She ordered the manicotti she always ordered. She asked Jasmine about the boxes still in the trunk. She laughed when the busboy made a joke about Friday traffic. She held her wine glass very carefully so the tremor in her fingers would not show. Then, between the entree and the dessert, her phone vibrated against the table. She glanced at it. The blood left her face. A polite automated message from Human Resources. Notice of formal complaint filed. Hearing to follow. Subject, improper supervision of cleaning staff. Filer, Justice H. Caldwell. Margaret slid the phone face down. She picked up her fork and pretended to eat. Jasmine noticed. She always noticed. "Mama, what was that?" "Nothing, baby. Just spam." Jasmine did not press her. Not yet. Across town, in the study of a 4-bedroom colonial with manicured boxwoods out front, Justice Harrison Caldwell sat at his mahogany desk with a tumbler of bourbon and the HR portal open on his laptop. He typed slowly. He chose his words. "During an unscheduled inspection of Courtroom 3 on Friday afternoon, I discovered an unauthorized individual on the courtroom floor, ostensibly assisting Ms. Margaret Owens with a cleaning task. This individual was confrontational, refused to provide credentials, and demonstrated a pattern of insolent behavior consistent with broader concerns about supervisory standards in the cleaning crew." He paused, took a sip, smiled at his own phrasing. "In addition to my recommendation regarding the unauthorized individual, I formally request that Ms. Owens's supervisory practices be reviewed prior to the finalization of her retirement benefits. A 32-year career deserves the dignity of a thorough exit review." He clicked submit. It was a knife dressed up as paperwork. He poured another finger of bourbon. He had no idea he had just signed his own indictment. Saturday afternoon, the Riverside Club. Oak-paneled grill room, low chandelier, a Bordeaux from the cellar. Caldwell sat with 2 associate justices. The bourbon from Friday had become a second-day swagger. "Some woman," he was saying, leaning forward. "Alone in my courtroom after hours? Mop in her hand, sleeves rolled. The mother is the Owens cleaner. Margaret, you know her. But the daughter looked like she had wandered in off the street." He laughed. "I told her to crawl back to whatever pile of garbage she came out of. Hand to God, I said it just like that." One associate justice chuckled into his glass. The other did not. Justice Eleanor Bristow set her wine down very slowly. She was 61 years old, the only woman at the table. Harrison? What? Just be careful what story you tell over dinner. He waved her off. It is a private club, Ellie. The walls don't talk. But the man 2 tables over, a retired city editor of the Capital Herald, 90% deaf in his left ear but sharp as broken glass in his right, was already on his phone. Theodore Hargrove had been a courthouse lifer for 30 years. He had seen Caldwell at his worst, yelling at clerks, calling janitors by the wrong names on purpose, the small daily cruelties of a man who believed his robe protected him from consequence. Hargrove had walked past it. He had told himself it was not his job to police a sitting justice. He had a daughter in graduate school. He had a mortgage. He had reasons. But on Saturday night, his wife, Renee, set down her tea and looked at him over her reading glasses. You haven't said 2 words all day. What is it? He told her. All of it. The black woman on the floor, the mop, the phone call, the way Caldwell had spoken to Margaret about her pension. Renee listened. Renee was a retired civil rights paralegal. When he finished, she said one sentence. Then you know what you have to do. Saturday night, in a small house across town, Margaret sat at her kitchen table. The HR notice glowed up at her from her phone screen. She had read it 11 times. She had not eaten dinner. 32 years. She had cleaned that courthouse through 3 administrations. She had wiped vomit off the marble during a flu outbreak. She had stayed late when the snow fell. She had buried a husband and raised a daughter on that paycheck. A pension was not a number. A pension was every Christmas, every birthday, every cold morning she had pulled herself out of bed. Now a man who had never said her name correctly was reaching for it. She did not call Jasmine. She did not want her daughter to know. On Sunday morning, in the rental apartment she had taken for the week, Jasmine sat on a small balcony with her coffee. A black robe hung in a garment bag on the back of the door. She watched the leaves shift in the wind. She did not know about the HR filing. She did not know about Hargrove's affidavit. She did not know about the texts piling on Charles Whitfield's phone. She only knew that her mother had gone quiet Friday night and stayed quiet ever since. She let her mother have her quiet. Some hurts asked to be carried alone, even by people we love. But on Monday morning, Jasmine had decided she would say a few words from the bench that she had not planned to say. A few quiet words about who held this courthouse up and who got to walk into a room without being asked to prove they belonged in it. Sunday morning, the courthouse stayed dark. Its people did not. Calvin Daniels called his old partner from the security overnight shift. He did not say much. He said enough. Something happened Friday. With Margaret, with her daughter. Caldwell went off. By 11, 2 senior clerks were on the phone. By 1, a deputy court reporter had heard the story from a 3rd source. By 3, Charles Whitfield, chief court administrator, 28 years in the building, the man who actually kept the place running, had received 4 separate texts using the words Caldwell, incident, and staff. Whitfield did not call anyone back. He poured himself a cup of coffee. He walked into his home office, sat down, opened a yellow legal pad, and began listing names. He had handled 3 Caldwell incidents quietly over the years. Quietly. With paperwork buried, complaints redirected, junior clerks reassigned. He did not yet know about the camera in Courtroom 3. He did not yet know that the daughter on the floor was the woman taking the oath on Monday morning. He simply knew that something, this time, was going to be different. Sunday night, 11:52 p.m. Theodore Hargrove sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, a cup of tea gone cold beside him, and his wife asleep down the hall. He had been writing for 2 hours. He had erased and rewritten the opening paragraph 6 times. Lawyers, when they finally tell the truth, tend to over-edit it. Affidavit of Theodore J. Hargrove. I, Theodore J. Hargrove, having served as senior court attorney in this building for 30 years, do hereby attest to the following events witnessed on Friday afternoon in the doorway of Courtroom 3 between Justice Harrison Caldwell, Mrs. Margaret Owens, and a younger black woman whose identity I did not know at the time. He kept writing. He named the binder dropped on the floor. He named the phone call. He named the words that "one" and "thing" on the floor. He named the pension threat.
He saved the file. He printed it.
He signed it in blue ink. In the morning, he would walk it personally into the office of Charles Whitfield. He understood perfectly that he might be ending his career. He went to bed at 3. Sunday night at home, Caldwell watched the late news with bourbon number 4. Nothing about Friday. Nothing on the local station, nothing in the alerts on his phone. He swirled the ice in his glass and decided he had been right. The walls did not talk. The story would die where it always died. In the staff lounge, in the laundry room, in the muttering of people who did not matter. He had a director's breakfast Monday at 7, a swearing-in ceremony at 10. He would shake the new Chief Justice's hand, smile for one photograph, and then continue running this court the way he had always run it. He turned off the television. He went to bed. He had no idea that across town a 30-year court attorney was sliding an envelope into a manila folder. He had no idea that a chief court administrator was filling a yellow legal pad. He had no idea that the security camera in Courtroom 3 had captured every word. He had no idea who Jasmine Owens was. By Monday, 8:55 a.m., he would. Monday morning, 10 o'clock. The vaulted chamber of the state Supreme Court was filled by 9:45. Press in the back rows, state legislators in the second balcony, family members of all 7 justices in the front guest section. The portraits of 17 prior Chief Justices watched from their gilded frames. Margaret Owens sat in the front row of the guest section.
She had put on her best navy suit, the one she had worn to her daughter's law school graduation in 1999. She had washed her hands twice. She had told no one why she was there. Caldwell arrived at 5 minutes to 10 in his pressed robe. He took his seat in the front row of the justices' bench, second chair from the center. He nodded to 2 colleagues. He did not glance at the guest section. When he finally did glance, his eyes paused on Margaret. He registered her. He filed it away. Of course, the Owens woman. They always invited staff to ceremonies. Optics. He turned back to face the dais. He had no idea why she was sitting in the front row. At 10 o'clock exactly, Charles Whitfield stepped to the podium. He tapped the microphone once. The chamber went still. Please rise for the incoming Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of this state. The room rose. The side door to the right of the bench swung open. She walked in slowly. A full black robe pressed to a sharp seam down the front, hair pinned up, hands folded in front of her at the waist, heels making a quiet, even rhythm on the marble. It was the woman who, 2 days ago, had been kneeling with paper towels on the floor of Courtroom 3. It was the woman Caldwell had called that thing. She crossed to the center of the dais. She did not look at the bench. She looked at her mother. Margaret's eyes were already wet. Then, only then, Jasmine turned and faced the room. Caldwell's hands gripped the rail of the justice's bench. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His brain ran through a sequence of refusals in less than 2 seconds. Not possible. Coincidence. Same kind of face. Then his eyes found her shoes. Sensible, low-heeled, the same shoes. And his stomach lurched. The blood left his face in a clean, vertical drop. The associate justice beside him, who had laughed in the grill room on Saturday, slowly turned his head to look at him. Caldwell did not turn his head back. Governor Lawrence Hastings stepped forward to administer the oath. He held no Bible. He had been told in advance that the incoming Chief Justice would use one of her own. Margaret Owens stood up from the front row. She walked to the dais holding a small, worn family Bible. The cover was cracked. The pages were marked in 3 different colored ribbons. She held it out with both hands to her daughter. Jasmine placed her left palm on the Bible. She raised her right hand. Across the chamber, 3 press cameras shuddered at once. I, Jasmine Marie Owens, do solemnly swear. The photograph that would run on every front page in the country by sundown would not be of Jasmine in her robe. It would be of the 73-year-old woman in a Navy suit holding the Bible for her daughter, with 32 years of dignity in the lines of her face. When the oath was finished, Jasmine turned to the room. Thank you, Governor Hastings. Thank you to this court and to the people of this state who put their trust in me. Before I sit on this bench, I want to say one thing. The chamber was still. This courthouse is not built only by the people whose portraits hang in this hall. It is built by the clerks who stay late, by the officers who walk the corridors at night, by the women and men who push the carts that nobody notices. She paused. On Friday afternoon, in Courtroom 3, I encountered a member of this court who refused to see me. Caldwell's grip on the rail tightened until his knuckles went white. He did not see me. He saw what he had decided I was. He saw a black woman with a mop, and he decided that was the whole of me. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. Before he stands again under the robe of this court, I would like him to remember that he did not see me at all. Caldwell did not breathe. When she said Courtroom 3, he remembered the security camera, the one mounted high in the corner above the bench, the one he had not thought about since the contractor installed it 11 years ago. Always on, always recording, audio and video. Every word he had said on Friday afternoon, the binder he had dropped, the phone call, the threat against Margaret's pension, all of it, captured. The blood that had drained out of his face on the first reveal now drained a second time, out of his hands, his arms, the back of his neck. He sat down very slowly, because his legs would not hold him standing. The chamber was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air system. Jasmine waited a long beat. She let it land. She did not move. Then she walked calmly to the high center seat behind the bench, the seat reserved for the Chief Justice, and sat. Her hands rested on the bench. Her face was steady. Mr. Whitfield, please come forward. Charles Whitfield walked up the short aisle holding a thin manila folder against his chest. He laid it open before her. She did not need to read it. She knew what was inside. This court, Jasmine said, her voice carrying calmly through the chamber, has received an HR complaint filed Friday evening by Justice Harrison Caldwell against Mrs. Margaret Owens, alleging improper supervisory practice. That complaint is, by my order as Chief Justice, expunged from her record effective immediately. A small applause began in the guest section. Margaret pressed a tissue to her eyes. Further, this court has received this morning an affidavit from Senior Court Attorney Theodore Hargrove. We have also received internal phone log records of a call placed Friday afternoon from Courtroom 3, and we will be reviewing the security camera footage from that same courtroom. She paused. Each of these items is referred as of this moment to the Judicial Conduct Commission of this state for formal proceedings against Justice Harrison Caldwell. The gasp from the press section was audible. Finally, by order of this court, I am opening a 20-year audit of every complaint filed by courthouse staff, clerks, officers, cleaners, court reporters, against any sitting justice. Every complaint that was buried, every complaint that was redirected, every complaint that quietly disappeared.
She looked briefly at Whitfield. He did not flinch. He had been waiting for someone to ask for 28 years. "We are going to look at all of them." Caldwell rose on legs that did not quite obey him. "Chief Justice, Jasmine, I had no way of knowing." The word Jasmine on his tongue made the entire room flinch. He tried again. "It was a misunderstanding. The end of a long week. If I had known—" Jasmine's voice cut him cleanly. "That is precisely the point, Justice Caldwell. You should not need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." The silence after that sentence was the loudest sound in the chamber. Two court officers stepped quietly from the side wall. They did not touch him. They did not raise their voices. They simply stood, one on each side, and waited. Caldwell looked at them. He looked at the bench. He looked at the chamber, at the 17 portraits, at the press cameras, steady on it. He lowered his head and walked between the two officers through the side door he had used 1,000 times before. The same side door Jasmine had walked through 90 seconds earlier. He did not look at Margaret on the way out. A formal press release went out from the court's communications office at 11:17 a.m. Justice Harrison Caldwell was placed on administrative leave, effective immediately, pending Judicial Conduct Commission review. When the proceedings turned finally to the new business of the day, Jasmine called Margaret's name. "This is Margaret Owens. Would you please stand?" Margaret stood, hands clasped in front of her navy suit. "This court formally commends you, Mrs. Owens, for 32 years of service to this institution. You have walked these corridors longer than any justice currently seated on this bench. You have held this courthouse together with quiet dignity through 6 administrations. We thank you." The applause that followed was not polite. It was the kind that builds in waves from people who had been waiting their whole careers to clap for the right person. Outside the chamber in the marble corridor where the spill had been, a young clerk named Emily Brooks stood with her arms tight around her own waist. 6 months into her job, 26 years old. She had walked into Charles Whitfield's office at 7 that morning with her hands shaking. "Mr. Whitfield, I need to tell you something about Justice Caldwell, and I think you should pull the camera footage from Courtroom 3 on Friday afternoon." She had used her real name. She had used her badge. She had not been sure until 30 seconds ago that she would still have a job by the end of the day. Now she stood in the corridor, exhaling for the first time since dawn. By Wednesday of the first week, the Judicial Conduct Commission of the state had formally opened proceedings against Harrison Caldwell. The commission's chairperson appointed an independent investigator, Diana Holloway, a former federal prosecutor with 21 years of public integrity experience and a reputation for not being intimidated by people in robes. Holloway's first call was to Charles Whitfield. Her second was to Theodore Hargrove. Her third was to the courthouse cleaning supervisor. She did not call Caldwell. Not yet. She would let the record build first. By the second week, the wall began to crack. Holloway interviewed 63 courthouse employees over 9 days: cleaners, officers, clerks, court reporters, 2 retired bailiffs, a receptionist who had not spoken to a judge in 19 years. 12 of them came forward with documented incidents. A cleaning crew supervisor named Yvonne Carter produced a folder she had kept in her glove compartment for 6 years. 6 neatly written incidents involving Caldwell and members of her staff. A junior attorney of color described being told in chambers that her tone was inappropriate during a routine motion. A retired clerk wept halfway through her interview. Nobody had asked them before. That was the part that broke Holloway's voice when she briefed the commission. In the third week, Officer Calvin Daniels gave a sworn statement of 12 minutes. He confirmed the events of that Friday afternoon. He confirmed the order to handcuff Jasmine Owens. He confirmed the directive to put his supervisor's name on Caldwell's desk. He answered every question with, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, ma'am." When he finished, he stood up, nodded once, and went back to his shift. By the fourth week, the story was no longer the courthouse's. It was the country's.
Sarah Bennett, an investigative reporter who had been working on the file since the second day, published a 6,000-word piece in the Capitol Herald titled "The Quiet Cruelty of Justice Caldwell." She had spoken to 31 of the witnesses. She had reviewed 9 pages of internal phone logs. She had read every page of Theodore Hargrove's affidavit. The piece ran across 2 days. It was picked up by national papers. Civics teachers began assigning it the same week. The phrase "quiet cruelty" entered the conversation. The State Bar Association issued a public censure within 72 hours. The state legislature opened formal hearings on judicial accountability and on workplace protections for low-wage state employees. 2 of Caldwell's own former law clerks resigned from their current firms and gave public statements about their time in his chambers. The president of the state's largest civil rights coalition called for the commission to act with no further delay. Caldwell, through his lawyer, declined to comment. The lawyer would also later decline to comment. The Judicial Conduct Commission convened its formal evidentiary hearing at the end of the 5th week. The hearing was open to the public. The chamber was filled by 8 o'clock in the morning. Emily Brooks testified first. She walked the commission through the morning of her conversation with Charles Whitfield. She authenticated the security camera footage. The footage played on a single large screen, 3 minutes and 40 seconds of Friday afternoon, audio and video, in front of the 7 commissioners and a packed gallery. When the playback ended, no one in the room spoke. Yvonne Carter testified next, then a former bailiff, then a court reporter, then a junior attorney. Each described a pattern. Each named a date. Each closed a small gap in the timeline the commission was building. Margaret Owens testified last. She wore the same navy suit. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She read a statement she had written on the kitchen table the night before, in a steady hand, on 3 sheets of lined paper. I have cleaned this courthouse for 32 years. I have worked through 3 chief justices. I have raised my daughter on this paycheck. I have been called by my first name by every justice on this bench except one. I have been called by no name at all on Friday afternoon by Justice Caldwell, in front of my daughter, and told that the pension I have earned across 32 years could be held up if I did not make myself smaller. She paused. She looked at the commissioners. I am too old to make myself smaller. I would like the record to reflect that. She folded the pages. She sat back down. The hall did not breathe for a long time. Caldwell testified through his counsel. He pleaded the strain of a long week, the pressures of an unfair appointment process, a misunderstanding, an isolated incident. The commission asked him about Yvonne Carter's 6 documented incidents. He had no answer. The commission asked him about the language of the phone log. He had no answer. The commission asked him about the binder he had dropped on the floor of Courtroom 3. He had no answer. His defense ran for 23 minutes. It did not survive the first 5. Outside the chamber, the next 2 days were quiet for 2 very different households. In a 4-bedroom colonial across town, Harrison Caldwell sat in his study alone. The bourbon was gone. He did not return calls. His wife was visiting her sister in another state. He had not been formally barred from the building yet, but he had not been welcome either. In a small house on Maple Street, Jasmine sat with her mother at the kitchen table. Margaret stirred sugar into her coffee, slowly. Jasmine, in jeans and a sweatshirt, watched the steam rise. "Mama," Jasmine said, "You did a beautiful thing in that hearing." Margaret set down her spoon. "Baby, I wasn't trying to be beautiful. I was trying to be honest." Jasmine reached across the table and held her mother's hand. The commission deliberated for 2 days. Its findings were unanimous. Justice Harrison Caldwell was found to have engaged in a sustained pattern of conduct unbecoming a member of the judiciary, including racially discriminatory treatment of state employees and the filing of a false retaliatory complaint. The commission recommended removal from the bench. The state Supreme Court, with Chief Justice Owens recused,
voted 6-0 to accept the recommendation. Caldwell was removed. Under the state's judicial misconduct forfeiture statute, his pension was canceled. He was permanently barred from future judicial office. The state attorney general opened a parallel civil rights review of the same conduct. A class-action civil rights suit brought by the courthouse cleaning staff for hostile work environment settled 3 months later. The settlement included a substantial sum, mandatory anti-bias training across all state judicial branches, an anonymous reporting system, and the establishment of an independent ombudsperson's office. 6 months later, spring. In a small house on Maple Street, Margaret Owens worked her tomatoes in the morning sun. She wore an old straw hat. Her hands moved through the soil with the same careful patience she had once used to polish marble floors. The neighbor's cat sat on the fence, watching her with mild approval. She had retired on a Friday, 2 weeks after the swearing-in. She had cried once in the staff break room when 41 people stood up to applaud her. Then she had gone home, kicked off her work shoes for the last time, and slept 10 hours. She did not miss the courthouse. The courthouse missed her. The staff break room on the second floor had a new sign on the door in modest brass lettering: the Owens Room. No one had asked anyone's permission for the name. The cleaning crew had voted. The vote was unanimous. In the chambers of the Chief Justice, on the wall opposite the desk, a framed photograph hung where the traditional portrait of a predecessor would have been. The photograph was old, faded a little around the edges. A woman in a janitor's uniform in 1995, leaning against a brass railing in the rotunda, smiling at someone behind the camera. Visitors sometimes asked who she was. The Chief Justice always answered the same way: "That is the woman who taught me what a courthouse is for." Emily Brooks, now a full clerk to Chief Justice Owens, led a small group of incoming summer associates down the corridor on a Tuesday morning. She stopped them at the doorway of Courtroom 3. She did not lower her voice. "Something happened here 6 months ago. I want to tell you about it. Not because of what happened, though that matters, because of what we did with it after." She told them the whole thing. Then she walked them on. Outside the offices of the Judicial Conduct Commission, beside the door, a small brass plaque had been installed 2 months earlier. 3 lines in plain capital letters: "All who serve are equal under these robes." People paused to read it. Some of them ran their fingers across the engraving. Then they walked on into the rest of their day. Across the city, in the same 4-bedroom colonial with the same boxwoods, Harrison Caldwell walked to his front porch every morning at 7 to fetch the newspaper. He read the paper at his kitchen table. He no longer subscribed to the legal periodicals. His phone rang less. The world had moved on from him. He had not moved on from himself. That same month, Chief Justice Jasmine Owens authored her first major opinion. It was unanimous. It expanded workplace protections for low-wage state employees against retaliation by supervisors. It established a new clear legal standard for what counted as a retaliatory pattern. The opinion ran 92 pages. Lawyers across the country would teach it for decades. But the line that traveled, the line that appeared on protest signs, in graduation speeches, in op-eds, was the last sentence of the conclusion, attributed only to an unnamed courthouse janitor. You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. The first photograph in the new gallery of the state Supreme Court was a small one, 6 inches by 8, black frame. It showed a daughter and a mother side by side on the limestone steps of a building that belonged, finally, to both of them. The morning sun caught the lines in their faces. Both of them were smiling. What you have just heard is a story. The names are fiction. The hallway is real. A version of it plays out every day. A woman with a mop assumed to be only what she is holding. A clerk dismissed mid-sentence. A name not learned because no one thought it was worth learning. The question worth carrying away is not whether this happens. The question is what each of us does when we are the ones standing close enough to see it. If this story moved you, leave your honest answer in the comments below. Hit the like button if you want more stories like this one. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so the next one finds you. Dignity is not granted by titles. It is owed to every person who walks into a room. Stay loud. Stay kind. See you in the next one.
The story is over, but one thing keeps sticking with me. We were all taught the same rule as kids. Don't judge the book by its cover. We're not alone. We tell our kids, we put it on classroom walls, but we don't actually live by it. The truth is, we judge people in the first 3 seconds by what they're wearing, what they're doing, where we find them. The brain wants shortcuts, so we make them, and then we spend the rest of the interaction acting on a decision we made before the person even spoke. That's the uncomfortable part. Most of us aren't actually responding to the people. We are responding to the story we told ourselves by them 3 seconds ago. The real person never gets a chance. And here's what makes it worse. The people we were most likely to misjudge are the ones the world has already labeled for us. The cleaner, the cashier, the person who doesn't talk like us. The world handles the label and we accept it without checking. So the lesson isn't be nicer. The lesson is stay curious longer. Don't lock in your judgment in 3 seconds. If the person 15, ask one real question. Look at them like they might be more than you assumed, because almost everyone is. You would be surprised how different people look when you actually let them show you who they are. If you were in the hallway, would you have spoken up? I would recommend hit like, subscribe. See you next time.